So Mo said that y'all acted up.
Mo is wrong.
He is. So y'all don't act up? Y'all are all grown up this year, huh?
Can I move right here?
Yes.
This Wraith kid's head similar head. My bad with big head.
You mean Rafe?
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, Evan normally sits there, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You could move over here if you wanted to,
Yeah.
permanently. Wait, who sits there?
I don't know.
I used
But
to.
you wanna stay there?
I don't wanna sit over.
You wanna stay here?
Yeah.
Okay, you can sit there.
Here we go.
What? So we got a lot to cover today. So we're gonna talk about the earliest civilizations. We talked yesterday about what a civilization was. And there were 4 important early civilizations that we call river valley civilizations. Can anybody guess why they're called river valley civilizations?
They're next to a river.
Yes, they were in river valleys, yes. Why would they need to be near a river?
So they get water.
You have to have water and crops, yeah. Pretty much, you have to have water to drink, but that's everywhere, but being near a river is gonna help you. A creek or a stream could swell or dry up, but a river is not going to. And so the 4 river valley civilizations, can anybody name any of them? There were 4 around the world. Well, there were no river valley civilizations in the Western world. This was all Afro-Eurasian. So where would one of them be? It might be on the screen, by the way.
Invaders.
No invaders. Go up about 3 sections. Yes, Egypt. What's the river there?
No.
The Nile River, you know, where the pyramids were. That was probably the second oldest civilization. The first one was where the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley is. That's where Iraq is today. It was called Sumer, later Babylon. So here's the Nile River, and here is the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. You notice how green that is and how green that is, but notice around it is sand. Egypt is pretty much sand all through Africa, except for a couple of spots where there's rivers. And where the river is, there's life, but where it's not, it's not. Of course, Saudi Arabia is almost all sand. And then you've got the Nile River. So you've got a river here, the Nile River here, and the Tigris-Euphrates here. And if you look at these 3 areas, the Nile, the River Jordan, the Red Sea and the Sea of Galilee, and the Tigris-Euphrates, they create a curve like this. And historians call that anybody? Fertile Crescent. So a crescent is like that upside down circle because it goes up here and then comes down here. These were the earliest civilizations. So you have the Nile and the Sumerian, or some people call it Babylon, stuff like that. Okay, and then the other 2, somebody tell me where the other 2 river valleys might have been. It's not in the books, in the next chapter. Guess.
Ancient Sumer.
We already got that. That's the second one. Where would the other 2 be? They were not in the New World. They're not in Africa. So where might they be? Asia. So name a place it might be in Asia.
China.
China would be one of them. Where do you think another one might be?
Japan,
No. At least you're trying.
Russia,
No. They're all right near the same equator line. But it is in Asia. So
Mongolia.
what?
Mongolia.
No.
India?
Yes. So you have India and China, Sumer, which is Babylon, and the Nile. These are the 4 river valley civilizations. They were the earliest ones. Okay? So we're going to go and look through each one. So here is the first one, and you can see the Nile River is the only river in the world, major river in the world, that flows from south to north. We have some rivers that flow sort of south, northwest, northeast. Like in Europe, there's some rivers that kind of flow a little bit from from western Russia up, but there's not any other river that goes straight north like that. The Amazon is east-west, Mississippi River is north to south, Ohio River north to south, Missouri north to south, the Danube south, north to south, northwest to southeast. But if you notice here, Upper Egypt is below Lower Egypt, and that's because Upper Egypt is where the river was flowing, coming down. Now, gosh, I hate to do this, but I gotta do it. I want to show you why the world is north. Okay, here are 2 maps of the earth. One is from the South Pole and one of them is from the North Pole. What do you notice about the difference between the 2?
one's bigger.
Well, they're both exactly half the world.
It has a lot more land.
Which one?
The north.
Yeah. Look how much of the world is in the north. All of Europe, all of Asia, all of North America, all of Central America, the top part of South America, and most of Africa is in the north. Look how little is in the south. You have Australia. Now, most of South America is. See, Australia, South America, a little bit of Africa, and so we are a northern-centered world. People wonder why the map isn't upside down, because the north rules the world, and that's just the way it is. And if you look, and this is kind of, we kind of don't quite tell the truth sometimes in our minds. We say things that aren't true. Look how much further south America is than Africa. So here is the equator, right through here. And if you notice how much stuff is above the equator, but everything is right here. Everything is in this temperate. There's not much going on down here in the world. So we have the Yellow River, which is right here. We have the Indus River, which is right here. We have the Tigris-Euphrates here and the Nile here. So all 4 of these rivers are right here. They're right in this area. This is where the earliest world was. In fact, there's a theory called the out of Africa theory that says that they believe the first humans came from this area. They came from right in here. And if you look at DNA, they've kind of figured it out that that's what happened. Thousands of years ago, the water levels were lower. We went through some cooling, and we went through the cooling. We had an ice age, and during the ice age, a lot of water froze. That lowered the ocean levels, and when the ocean levels were lower, it was possible to walk from the edge of Russia across to America. You can see that map over there maybe a little better, but you can see that there's the Aleutian Islands and that they're fairly shallow. So what happened was that the people were able to transverse this area and come to the New World. And DNA-wise, we look at the people here in the New World, and they matched the people from Asia to a degree. And so there's a lot of similarities there. So what happened was these people in these river valleys started spreading out, and originally they were in the river valleys, but then they decided to spread out, and as they did, they moved north and south and all over the place. It took thousands of years for this to happen. The oldest city in the world, dated probably around 8,000 BC, 10,000 years ago, is the city of Jericho. The one in the Bible, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. There's an archaeological dig there, and most people believe it's the oldest. So if you look at, let me get back to here. I gotta go back to this. I love technology, as long as it works. So if you look at Egypt, you also see that it goes up to Palestine, that the empire and their routes were all up into Palestine, which is where Israel was. That's where Jericho was. So we have Egypt. So let's talk about Egypt. When you think of Egypt, ancient Egypt, what do you think of?
Pyramids.
Yeah, what were they?
Where the pharaohs
Where the pharaohs what?
were buried.
Yeah, why?
Tombs, so they
They
could.
built a stairway or something like to the sky or whatever.
Yeah,
To a second life.
yeah. What else was in Egypt? We got the pharaohs.
A lot of desert.
Yeah,
Camels.
everything, camels, everything's centered around the Nile. Okay. So did they write in English? What was the language they used? I don't remember.
Egyptian.
What is it called? Hieroglyphics. Have you heard that word before? It was a picture language. Okay. The Nile is everything. The Nile every year the mountains down in this south part, down here in Nubia, down in the upper part of the Nile, there were mountains and they had snow, and every spring the snow would melt, and of course it would flood towards the Nile, and every spring the flood would come rushing down the Nile, and it would bring with it loads of topsoil that washed away. It was called loam, L-O-A-M. They called it black soil. And Egypt had two types of soil, black soil and red or desert soil. This desert soil was useless. The black soil was their life. So every spring it would flood and it would spread out, and when it dried up, they could plant crops there. Not only was the ground wet, but it wasn't sand anymore because it had the topsoil. So what would happen one year if there wasn't much snow and there wasn't much flood?
They would be able to plant.
It was famine. Yes. What would happen if the weather acted up and the floods came later in the year? Then it was too late for the growing season. The scientists, scholars, magicians in Egypt had little posts that they stuck in the soil on the banks of the river with marks on them, and they looked at their calendars and they knew, if the floods don't come by this day, we're not going to have a good year. And they would watch it, and they kept up because the soil was the lifeblood. Third sentence, Egypt depended on annual floods to soak the land and deposit a layer of soil. So they would work to build dikes, reservoirs, and irrigation ditches. And so they would do all they could. There are spots on the Nile where you can't take a ship from one end to the other because there are little waterfall areas called cataracts. There's 3 of them. Oh, you can't see them. Yeah, you can. If you look at this map, do you see the little horizontal lines across the river? Right in Nubia, there's 2, and below it, and 2 above it, those are cataracts. Those are little spots where you cannot take a ship. So if you're down in Nubia, which is Ethiopia, and you want to carry stuff from there up to Egypt, you have to carry it on a barge. You can put it on a barge, float it down the river. You get there, you got to unload it, walk around it, and go back in. So it made it a lot harder to work. Unlike the Tigris Euphrates, you could sail from one end to the other. Unlike the Mississippi River, you could sail from one end to the other, or the Yellow River. So it was not as easy, but they really worked with it, okay? So I'm not going to ask you to know the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, but there were Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. The pharaohs started the old ones, the middle ones developed drainage, and the New Kingdoms came back again. The Middle Kingdom was a group of people called the Hyksos, and they were what the Bible calls they were the Phoenicians, and the Bible calls them the Philistines. Okay. So, question 1, why were the Nile floods so important to the Egyptians? A, they created a much needed supply of drinking water. B, the Egyptians held religious ceremonies. C, the floodwaters deposited silk. D, the floodwaters kept away potential invaders. C's the right answer, yeah. It's not quite drawn up right, is it? Yeah, it wasn't because of drinking water, okay. Which of the following was the achievement of the Middle Kingdom? A is the right answer. The draining. Okay. There we go. How did religious beliefs shape the lives of them, and how was their society? So they had a bunch of gods and goddesses. Amun-Re was the sun god. Osiris was the god of the underworld. The pharaoh was considered to be a god. They had a book called the Book of the Dead, and they practiced mummification. This is interesting that the Egyptians could mummify bodies better than we can today. We don't know how they did it, but they were able to do stuff that we can't replicate even today. Now, we're not trying. I mean, they thought that the body needed to survive in the afterworld, and we don't really do that. In fact, our society has created a whole economy of burying people. When my daddy died in 2010. 2008, wow. When my daddy died in 2008, we went to the funeral home, and my mom wanted to buy one of these vaults that go down in the ground, and it said United States Marine Corps. It had that big emblem on it. Well, my dad was in the Marines. He went to boot camp, and he finished boot camp as a private, but then they looked at his teeth and said, there's something wrong with your teeth, and they sent him home. So he was in Marines for, 7 weeks? And he got an honorable discharge, but it's not like he fought in the war or anything. But my mother just had to have that plaque that was probably $5,000. And I said, Mom, we're going to see that for maybe 10 minutes. And we did. We got to the graveside, everybody's sitting there, and there's this brass plaque with the Marines, and then they buried it, covered it up. So we spent thousands of dollars for something that we never need. Well, the vault, you know what a vault is? It's like this big, huge concrete or plastic box that when you bury people, you put them in this vault, and then you put it underground. So you got a casket. You got the body inside the casket, inside the vault, in the ground. Why do you think people buy that vault?
Nobody can rob the graves.
No, so the body won't decay as fast. Okay, why? The person's dead. Don't you think their body's gonna decay? Do you think putting it in the vault will keep it from decaying as fast? And they say, well, if you just put that casket down in the grave, worms will get in it. Yeah, but the person's dead. Okay, so we have some weird things too. We want to save the body. Why do we embalm the bodies, by the way?
So it won't stink.
Yeah, because we do funerals 3 days to a week later. By the way, Jewish people and Muslim people are going to bury them within 24 hours. I think Jewish will allow 72 hours, but they don't embalm the bodies. So if you've got a friend who's Jewish and they die, they're going to be buried the next day. Muslims within 24 hours. So they do not embalm. but we in America do. And then we go to the graveside, we go to the cemetery, or the funeral home, and the casket's open and the person's laying there like that, and you go, oh, he looks like he's sleeping. So we do the same thing, not quite like the Egyptians, but we do some strange things. Okay. So they did some good stuff, the hieroglyphics. Does your book have a picture of the hieroglyphics? Here's a picture of hieroglyphics. You notice anything in the hieroglyphics?
Bird.
Yeah, the birds.
Bird.
And then right next to the bird, there's like some other stuff.
And there's some lips and lion.
It's a hand.
Yeah, there's a lion, and that's an eye.
That's,
And is that a hand?
I don't think
nah,
so.
that's like 2 fingers.
Like 2 fingers? Yeah, and over here there's like these things. Is that a bell or something? See, I can't read. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the eye.
There's a snail.
Yeah.
See
that's
the eye?
lips.
And that's like a snake. What is this? Is this lips?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, so here's a guy.
There's a crown up there.
Is that a crown?
Definitely.
There's a flag.
That's SpongeBob.
Their arms.
And that's like, is that like a wolf? What's,
There's some arms.
Oh yeah, that's like gold.
that's gotta be the snake.
That looks like a slug.
And there's somebody,
Praising.
yeah, okay, it was picture language. And so, this is what hieroglyphics are, picture languages type thing. Okay, so they perform surgery. We have skulls that have drill hole in them where they actually did some sort of surgery. We don't know how successful they were. They did develop a 12-month calendar, which is really interesting. Let's talk about calendars. There are 12-month calendars and 13-month calendars. Why? Tell me the difference.
Starts up, 12 year.
12-month is what?
It starts up the new year, like after the 12 months, and 13 month is, you can take that one.
They both last 1 year, 365 days. Why would one be 12 months and one be 13?
Days or
No,
something to do with crops or seasons.
no. Y'all help me out here.
Different places for different.
No.
There are less days in a month.
Yeah, you're right. If there are 13-month calendars, there have to be less days in the month than if there are 12. So let's figure this out. This is weird. You can do it. If you take away day 29, 30, and 31 from all of the months and you add them together, guess how many days you come up with? 28. 28. So that means that if you have a 13-month calendar, every month has exactly 28 days.
What was the 13th month called?
Well, they're lunar months, and that's the whole point. They have different names. Every full moon started a new month. And so the cycle of the moon was the lunar months. But we got off the lunar months because of the Romans. In fact, Julius Caesar was the one that came up with it. And in fact, there was originally 10 months. And it had nothing to do with the moon. And Julius Caesar didn't like that. He wanted to change things. I'm sorry, it wasn't Julius Caesar. It was Caesar Augustus, his nephew. And he created 2 extra months. He added 2 months to the calendar. Can you guess which ones they were? Caesar Augustus.
August.
And his uncle was Julius Caesar.
July.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed that December decimal should be the 10th month, but it's the 12th? And October, should be the 8th month, but it's the 10th. It's because they stuck July and August in the middle of the year. So we had a 10 month that had nothing to do with the lunar calendar. But if you have a 12-month calendar, that's pretty weird. And it was based on constellations, so they did that. Okay. So they drew and stuff like that. All right. So there was the Pharaoh and the priest and the nobles and the merchants and the peasants. This slave system where there's an earthly leader and then there's religious leaders and then there's rich people and soldiers and then down at the bottom there's merchants and then all the way at the bottom is poor people. This social pyramid, you'll see it over and over and over in all of world history. It's the way it is. Okay. Who was the Egyptian god of the underworld?
Osiris.
Yes. What is the one reason the Egyptians developed geometry? I think it actually said it, didn't it?
Large sculptures.
Pyramids.
Possibly, let's see. To survey the land. Okay, so now we're looking at the Fertile Crescent. I mentioned that to you earlier. And here is the land between the Tigris and Euphrates called Sumer. Sumeria. They had city-states. They had a whole system of up and down, and they had a lot of different gods. They created their own pyramid called a ziggurat. Let's see, a ziggurat. We're going to have to look up a ziggurat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here's a ziggurat. In fact, this is one. That's what they think they look like. That's a rebuilt one. So that's kind of a ziggurat, which is sort of a pyramid-ish thing. So it just got higher. I guess that's a real one, isn't it? Although I have to say it looks like somebody rebuilt it. I don't think that's all that time ago. But that first one we looked at was that's probably a real ziggurat. Incidentally, the ziggurats here, do you remember in the Genesis, the 9th chapter, the 10th chapter, there's a story about the Tower of Babel where they wanted to build a tower to heaven. This is probably what we're talking about, these ziggurats. So, in fact, there's an article comparing the two. Okay, back to our little slideshow. They developed another form of writing called cuneiform. Let's go look up cuneiform. It's a little different. And you'll need to know the difference between cuneiform and hieroglyphics. So what they would do is they would take a clay, they would mix water and sand and build a tablet, and it's soft, and then they would take a little stylus and put marks in it. And so these marks become the way to read. So unlike hieroglyphics, which are pictures, this is actually codes. The reason they developed this, I told y'all that gold comes first. They had to have a record of their trading. So the people would write down counting, was 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks. So this is what a hieroglyphic looked like. Here's another one that's a little different. In fact, this one kind of is a mix, isn't it? It's got little clicks, but it also looks like it's got triangles and stuff. So there were different types of cuneiform.
Oh yeah, we at West a couple years ago, we actually made it out of Play-Doh.
You did?
Yeah,
Okay.
started doing
You'll
that
have to
for-
bring it then. You have it? You didn't keep it?
No,
You mean it's not in your room up on a shelf somewhere?
not throw it away.
Okay, good. This is interesting that somebody took this and they really have a lot of time on their hands. They took these cuneiforms from the different groups, from the Sumerian vertical and rotated, and the early Babylon and late, and the Assyrian, and told what these items are. So this has to be some college professor, because nobody has a real job has time to do this. But you can look, the fourth one down is a man, and he looks kind of silly. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the cuneiform was, okay? So the Fertile Crescent was the land when, where?
Around the rivers.
Yeah, they'll probably say Tigris and Euphrates. Let's see. Yeah, they'll say Tigris and Euphrates. Most people were poor. Okay, now we're going to look at gold and stuff like that. There was a man named Sargon in 2300 who became the first known empire, called Acadia. And Hammurabi united the Babylonians in 2300 and 1700. Have y'all heard of either one of these? Sargon or Hammurabi? Okay. Hammurabi had a law. It was first written down law that we know of, and it was criminal and civil. There's actually some little statues of Mr. Hammurabi. There he is. Of course, they didn't make that one, but somebody did. There were some pretty old statues, and if you notice, by then, I don't want to see those pictures. By then, we were getting to where there was actually some artwork. So you start seeing stuff like that. So you're actually starting to see some stuff. There's an old one. So around 2000 BC, they're starting to do stuff like that. Real statues and junk like that. Okay. Persian Empire was a guy named Cyrus the Great. If you read the story of Esther in the Bible, that was about the time of Cyrus. There was a religion called Zoroastrianism at the time. And then the Phoenicians, also known as the Hittites, spread all around the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians were the ones who ended up fighting the Romans for strength, and the Romans won. They were the ones who invented the alphabet. Now, when I say they invented the alphabet, the earliest alphabet we have came from them, but there were earlier ones. The Hebrew people had an alphabet about that time. But alpha is the Greek word for letter A, and bet comes from beta, the second one. And so alphabet means the order of the letters, and the Phoenicians were the ones that gave us the order of the letters. However, if you read Psalm 119 in the Bible, it also has the order of the letters. So somewhere about that time, the Phoenicians were in, so they were pretty important. So who was the first person to write down laws? Hammurabi, yeah. And who invented the alphabet?
The Babylonians.
The Phoenicians.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Okay, so let's talk about the Jews now, the Israelites. Around 2000, Abraham came from the Fertile Crescent down to Canaan, and he began the Israelite nation, ended up in Egypt. And by the way, there are archaeological records of the Jewish people being in Egypt. And they came out of the promised land, into the promised land, which is Canaan, which is modern day Israel. 1000 BC, David unites Israel. There's archaeological evidence that David existed. In 922, the kingdom split, and Solomon was also king, and the Babylons defeated them, and so they were one of the earliest religions. They were not the earliest religion. The earliest is the Hindu. We have no idea how old Hinduism. We have no idea. We have no record of who wrote any of their documents. They're just like shrouded in mystery. Okay. The Israelites were monotheistic, which means one God. And they believed he was all powerful and all present. And they were God's chosen people. And they lived in the promised land promised to them. And out of Judaism came two other religions. First Christianity, and then later Islam. Okay. The Jews followed the Ten Commandments. Y'all know about it. You're probably more familiar with them than the other stuff. Okay, so who founded the religion of Israel? Abraham. Which is not a belief of Judaism. All people are equal before God. Kings are bound by God's law. The rich and powerful must protect the poor. There are many gods, each of which must be worshipped equally. Yeah, the last one is not a belief of Judaism. Okay. That's all we have. We covered a chapter in a day. Okay, any questions? Now we know all this stuff, right? Isn't this exciting?
Super.
Okay, I'm done. What time do we leave here?
Like, you know,
Oh, okay, good. We had an exciting time today.